The Grand Assembly Hall stretched so far that Marcus Webb could barely see the opposite wall. Above him, a dome of pure crystal showed the purple nebula swirling outside. Below his feet, the judgment platform glowed with soft blue light. Around him, rising in circles like an ancient amphitheater, sat representatives from 700 different species. Some had scales, some had fur, some looked like living crystals or floating clouds of gas. Every single one of them was staring at Marcus. He stood alone in the center of the platform. His hands stayed clasped behind his back. His face remained calm, but inside, his heart pounded hard enough that he wondered if the aliens could hear it. High above, on thrones that seemed to float in the air, sat the Council of 16. These were the oldest civilizations in the galaxy, the most powerful, the ones who made decisions that affected trillions of lives across thousands of worlds. The largest of them leaned forward. His name was Thrace, and he had 4 arms covered in golden scales. His voice boomed through the hall, carried by technology Marcus did not understand. Ambassador Webb of Earth, you stand before us to request full membership in the Galactic Council. Your petition is ... unusual. Marcus said nothing. He had been trained for this moment. Let them talk first. Let them reveal what they knew, Thrace continued, his golden eyes narrowing. Your species has been traveling in space for only 43 of our cycles. Your technology is primitive compared to ours. Your world has no rare resources we need. Your entire population lives on a single planet orbiting a single star. Tell us, human, why should we grant you membership? Before Marcus could answer, another voice echoed through the chamber. This one belonged to a creature that looked like a giant insect made of crystal. It skittered forward on 6 legs, clicking and humming as it moved. High Counselor Thrace, the creature said. Before we hear the human's answer, I must present my findings. I am Professor Kelvon, and I have spent 30 years researching something that troubles me greatly. Kelvon touched a device on its leg. Suddenly, holographic images appeared above the assembly hall. Ancient stone carvings, broken pottery, faded scrolls covered in alien writing. These artifacts come from 14 different civilizations, Kelvon said. All of them are extinct. All of them died thousands of years ago. But they all share something disturbing. They all have images of humans. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Marcus felt sweat forming on his back, but he kept his face neutral. The hologram changed to show a massive stone tablet covered in strange symbols. This is from the Korthan Empire. They died 12,000 years ago. The writing says the 2 legs came from the dark waters. Where they walked, only silence followed. No weapon could stop them. No fortress could hold them. We called them the Endless War. More images appeared. Scrolls from dead civilizations. Paintings on cave walls. Stories carved into metal plates that had survived the death of entire species. The Prashani texts call them the patient death, Kelvin said, its voice rising with agitation. The Volmeri stones name them those who never stop. How can this be? How can a primitive species that never left their own planet appear in the nightmares of civilizations scattered across the galaxy? Kelvin turned its crystalline body toward Marcus. The light reflected off its surface in patterns that hurt to look at. Unless the humans have been hiding something, unless they are far more dangerous than they appear, the assembly hall erupted. Aliens shouted in languages Marcus could not understand. His translation device struggled to keep up. Words like deception and threat and monsters came through clearly enough. Thrace raised all 4 of his arms. The noise slowly died down. Ambassador Webb, Thrace said, and his voice carried a threat now. You stand accused of concealing your true nature, of hiding a violent history that spans thousands of years and thousands of light years. Before we can even consider your petition for membership, you will explain how your species became the terror in so many alien legends. Marcus stood very still. This was the moment. Everything humanity had planned for the last 6 months came down to the next few seconds. He took a slow breath and looked up at Thrace. High Counselor Professor Kelvon is not wrong. Those legends are real. Shocked silence filled the hall. But, Marcus continued, there has been a significant misunderstanding about what those legends actually mean. I think I should make a call home. There is someone who can explain this better than I can. Security drones hummed to life around the platform, their weapons charged with sounds like thunder building in the distance. But Thrace held up one hand to stop them. Explain yourself, human. Marcus pulled out a small communication device. My uncle can tell you more about this than I can. He is something of an expert on the subject. He paused and looked around at the hundreds of alien faces watching him. You see, Professor Kelvon is not wrong about the legends. But those stories do not mean what you think they mean. He pressed a button. Above the platform, a holographic screen appeared. After a moment, an old human face appeared on it. The man had wrinkles around his eyes and gray hair. He wore a simple shirt that looked like it was made for working outdoors, not for speaking to galactic councils. Marcus? The old man said, sounding confused. What is this about? I was just fixing the porch. Uncle Bob, Marcus said gently. The Galactic Council wants to know about the old days. The insertion missions. The deep reconnaissance. The times before the Accord. The old man's face changed. Something shifted in his eyes, like he was remembering things from a very long time ago. Around the chamber, translation devices struggled with the concepts being transmitted. Oh, Uncle Bob said quietly. Those days. Thrace leaned forward, and Marcus could see confusion on his face. Maybe even a little bit of fear. This elderly being is your war god? Marcus smiled, but there was no humor in it. Hi, Counselor, let me introduce you to Robert Williams, retired gunnery sergeant, decorated veteran of the Consolidation Wars, survivor of the Midnight Insertions. He paused, letting that information sink into the minds of 700 species. Among his people, we just call him Uncle Bob. Professor Kelvin's crystal body made rapid clicking sounds. This old creature is your mythical warrior? This is absurd. The legends speak of beings who could not be stopped, who destroyed armies, who— Professor, Marcus interrupted, and now his voice carried an edge like a knife. Perhaps you should ask him why humanity appears in all those ancient records. Go ahead. Ask him what the midnight insertions were. The massive assembly hall fell completely silent. 700 species waited for an answer that would change everything they thought they knew about the humans who wanted to join their council. Uncle Bob scratched his head. He looked uncomfortable, like someone who had been asked to talk about a difficult time in his life. Well, he said slowly, it started about 40,000 years ago, when we figured out we were not exactly alone in the universe. Uncle Bob shifted in front of the camera. Behind him, Marcus could see what looked like a simple wooden porch and a garden. It seemed impossible that this peaceful scene on Earth was connected to the vast chamber of the Galactic Council. Let me start from the beginning, Uncle Bob said. His voice was calm, like he was telling a story to children. But every word carried weight that made even the most powerful beings in the galaxy lean forward to listen. 40,000 years ago, your people called the architects came to Earth. They did not land. They did not introduce themselves. They just watched us from orbit. They studied humans like we were animals in a zoo. Then they decided we were too primitive and too violent to bother with. So they left. But they left something behind. Professor Kelvin's crystal body clicked nervously. What did they leave? A warning beacon, Uncle Bob said. Buried deep in Earth's mantle. It transmitted a message to every species in the galaxy, dangerous predator species. Do not engage. Observe only. Thrace spoke up, his forearms gesturing with confusion. If the architects warned everyone to stay away from Earth, how did your ancestors end up scattered across the galaxy? Uncle Bob smiled, and it was not a happy expression. Because humans are curious, Counselor. And we are very good at finding things we are not supposed to find. He explained how ancient humans discovered an architect observation post that had been abandoned in what Earth now called Turkey. Inside, they found technology they could not possibly understand. But humans did not need to understand something to use it. They found a device that looked like a doorway. Some of them were brave enough or stupid enough to step through it. Just like that, Uncle Bob said, snapping his fingers, they were on the other side of the galaxy. No training, no preparation, no understanding of what had happened. Just suddenly on an alien world surrounded by beings they had never imagined. The Galactic Council listened in growing horror as Uncle Bob described what happened next. The architect's civilization was not prepared for what followed. These humans did not arrive as conquerors with warships and armies. They arrived as terrified survivors who did what humans always do. They adapted, they observed, they learned. And when the architects tried to capture them or kill them, these humans fought back. Marcus took over the explanation. Earth's archaeological records show that over thousands of years, small groups of humans were accidentally or deliberately transported to various worlds. Sometimes it was through portal malfunctions. Sometimes it was because they found more of the ancient devices and activated them. Each time, they were stranded far from home, surrounded by species that were stronger, smarter, and more technologically advanced. Each time, Uncle Bob added, they survived. Professor Kelvin's holographic records suddenly made sense in a terrible new way. Those were not invasion stories. They were survival stories. Small groups of humans, sometimes just a few dozen people, dropped into alien civilizations where they had to live, adapt, and sometimes fight their way through hostile environments. The Korthan Empire, Uncle Bob said, pointing at one of the holograms still floating in the air. 3 fishing families. That is all. Just 3 families transported through a portal malfunction. They ended up on a Korthan agricultural world. The Korthans tried to enslave them because that is what the Korthans did to everyone they considered weak. He paused, his old eyes distant with memory. The humans escaped into the wilderness. They spent 20 years living in the forests and mountains. The Korthans called them ghosts because they would appear without warning, hit supply lines, free other slaves, and disappear again. Those 3 families taught the oppressed species on that world how to fight back. By the time the last of those original humans died of old age, they had started a rebellion that eventually destroyed the Korthan Empire. Uncle Bob looked directly into the camera, and through it, at the assembled species. They were not trying to destroy a civilization. They were just trying to survive, and maybe help some folks who reminded them of themselves. Counselor Thrace's voice shook slightly when he spoke. But the legends describe your people as unstoppable, as war gods who could not be defeated. Yeah, well, Uncle Bob said, scratching his chin. Here is the thing about humans, Counselor. We are not the strongest species. We are not the smartest. We are not the fastest or the toughest. But we are really, really good at one thing. We do not quit. He leaned closer to the camera. Our ancestors were persistence hunters. Back when we barely had language, we would chase animals for days until they collapsed from exhaustion. That instinct is in our bones, in our blood, in every cell of our bodies. You drop a human in an impossible situation, Uncle Bob continued, surrounded by enemies, with no resources and no way home, and most species would give up and die. Humans? He smiled grimly. Humans get creative. Humans make friends with the underdogs. Humans learn the local terrain better than the locals do. And humans keep going day after day, year after year, generation after generation if they have to. His voice grew softer but somehow more intense. To alien species who had never seen that kind of stubborn refusal to die, I guess we would look like war gods. Because gods are supposed to be immortal, right? And humans just refuse to stay dead? The assembly erupted in debate. Some species called for humanity's immediate quarantine. Others argued that this only proved humans were too dangerous for council membership. A few suggested that Earth should be destroyed before humans could spread further into the galaxy. Through the chaos. Marcus raised his voice. There is more you need to know. The noise gradually died down. The portal network was shut down 8,000 years ago, Marcus said clearly. Earth's people and government signed something called the Consolidation Accord 5,000 years ago. Every human civilization agreed. Every government, every tribe, every nation. We agreed to abandon all knowledge of the portals. We agreed to destroy our records of them. We essentially reset ourselves, choosing to develop naturally rather than rely on stolen ancient technology. He looked directly at Thrace. We chose peace over power, counselor. We chose to forget the legends and start fresh. Uncle Bob and a few others like him are the last living links to that old history. They remember so the rest of us can forget. They make sure we never accidentally reactivate those portals. They ensure humanity stays on the path we chose. Thrace sat back heavily on his throne. Why reveal this now? Why not let us believe you were simply a young, primitive species? Marcus's expression hardened. Because Professor Kelvin's research means others will discover the truth anyway. We would rather you hear it from us. We want you to understand the context. The humans who became your war gods were not conquerors or monsters. They were just people trying to survive in impossible situations. He paused, looking around at the 700 species watching him. And the humans you see today? We are their descendants, choosing a better path. The council called for a recess. The assembly dissolved into chaos as species argued among themselves. As the hologram of Uncle Bob began to fade, the old man gave Marcus a tired wave. Tell them the rest when you are ready, kiddo. About why we really want to join the council. The transmission ended. Marcus stood alone in the judgment circle again, surrounded by 700 species, trying to reconcile the peaceful-looking human before them with the legends that had terrified the galaxy for thousands of years high above. Counselor Thrace watched Marcus with new eyes. The human had revealed a truth that changed everything. But Thrace sensed there was more. Something humanity was still hiding. Something that would matter even more than ancient legends. About war gods and survival. 6 hours passed before the council reconvened. When Marcus was escorted back to the judgment platform, he immediately noticed the changes. Security forces from a dozen different species now lined the chamber walls. Their weapons were visible and ready. The atmosphere had shifted from skeptical to openly hostile. Counselor Thrace was no longer alone on the high bench. 6 new figures had joined him, beings Marcus had never seen before. They wore robes that seemed to absorb light, making them difficult to look at directly. One of them spoke, and Marcus felt the words in his bones rather than hearing them with his ears. I am Archivist Prime. We are the Deep Archives Council. We guard the galaxy's most dangerous historical records. Your uncle's testimony has forced us to access information we hoped would never be needed. Archivist Prime was unlike any being Marcus had seen. Her body appeared to be made of crystal, similar to Professor Kelvin, but her structure was more complex. Light moved through her in patterns that seemed to carry meaning. Ambassador Webb, she said slowly, the architects were not just observers. They were geneticists, the best in galactic history. When they studied your ancestors, they performed extensive biological analysis. Their records have been sealed in our vaults for thousands of years. Until now. A new holographic display appeared, showing images that Marcus recognized as cells and DNA structures. But the complexity was far beyond anything he had studied. Humans possess something we have never encountered in any other sapient species, Archivist Prime continued. You have adaptive evolution triggered by environmental stress. Not over millions of years, but across just a few generations. She manipulated the hologram, zooming into cellular structures. When human populations encountered alien pathogens, their immune systems did not just fight them off. They incorporated the alien elements and weaponized them. When humans lived on high-gravity worlds, their bone density increased within 3 generations. Low-light environments produced enhanced night vision in their children. Marcus felt cold sweat forming on his back. This was information Earth's governments had deliberately hidden. Information even Uncle Bob might not fully know. You do not just adapt culturally or technologically, Archivist Prime said, turning her crystal body toward Marcus. You adapt biologically. Rapidly, the architects called it aggressive evolution. They were terrified of it. Professor Kelvon suddenly clicked forward excitedly. That is why the descriptions vary so much. I thought it was translation errors, but the humans the Korthans encountered in water worlds actually were different from the humans the Volmiri encountered in crystal caverns. They had evolved to match their environments. Precisely, Archivist Prime confirmed. And when those adapted populations occasionally found each other or returned to Earth through portal malfunctions, they brought those adaptations back into the general human gene pool. Your species did not just survive impossible situations. You became better at surviving them with each generation. Counselor Thrace spoke up, his voice heavy with concern. This is why the architects left their warning beacon. Not because humans were violent, but because you are evolutionary wildcards, unpredictable, dangerous in ways that have nothing to do with technology or warfare. A new voice echoed through the chamber, and Marcus felt his blood run cold. It came from a sealed section of the assembly that he had assumed was empty. The voice sounded like wind through caves, like waves on distant shores. The humans should know the complete truth. In the sealed section, shadows shifted and something became partially visible. It looked like a being made of smoke and starlight, constantly changing form. "We are called the Whispers," the voice said. "We rarely speak in council matters, but this concerns us directly." The shadow being solidified slightly, enough for Marcus to see what might have been a face. "We are the architect's descendants. Our ancestors did not abandon Earth out of fear or disgust. They left because they saw humanity's potential." Marcus's hands clenched into fists. "What do you mean?" "They ran simulations," the Whisper explained. "Thousands of the... In every projection, humans either destroyed themselves in endless wars or evolved into something magnificent. Something the galaxy had never seen. The architects could not bear to influence that outcome either way. So they left the warning beacon, sealed the portals one by one over thousands of years, and waited. The chamber fell absolutely silent. When your ancestors signed the Consolidation Accord 5,000 years ago, the Whisper continued, agreeing to forget the portals and evolve naturally, our people celebrated. You chose unity over division. You chose patience over power. But we have watched ever since to ensure you stayed true to that choice. Marcus felt anger rising in his chest. You have been monitoring us? For 5,000 years? We have been protecting you, the Whisper corrected gently. 23 times other species attempted to invade Earth. They believed you were vulnerable and primitive. 23 times we redirected them. We confused their sensors. We made your world appear worthless or too dangerous. We could not let you be destroyed before you were ready. The galaxy needs what you might become. Archivist Prime moved closer to the platform. Which brings us to the real question, Ambassador Webb. Your species could remain isolated for another 1,000 years, developing at your own pace in complete safety. Why seek council membership now? Why risk exposing yourselves? Marcus took a deep breath. This was the moment. The real reason humanity had come to the council. 3 months ago, he said clearly, our deep space telescopes detected something. A fleet, massive and ancient, heading toward our galaxy from the void between galaxies. Based on their trajectory and speed, they will arrive in 40 years. He pulled out a data device and transmitted images to the council's display system. The hologram above the platform changed, showing distant objects moving through the darkness of intergalactic space. Even at extreme distance, the scale was terrifying. We had a choice, Marcus continued. Hide and hope they pass us by, or come here, join the council, and stand together. He looked around at the assembled species. Because here is what Uncle Bob and the other guardians teach us from those old days. Humans might survive alone. We are good at that. But we would rather survive together? The chamber erupted in noise, fear, anger, confusion. Some species demanded to know why humanity had kept this information secret. Others wanted to know more about the approaching fleet. Thrace called for order, his forearms raised high. When silence finally returned, he spoke directly to Marcus. You withheld information about an existential threat to the galaxy? We reported it to your monitoring stations 3 months ago, Marcus replied calmly. They ignored it. They said it was probably an instrumental error or natural phenomena. When we insisted, they told us to stop wasting their time with false alarms from primitive sensors. Several council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, so we decided to bring the information directly to you. Marcus continued, along with an offer. What offer? Thrace demanded. Marcus straightened, his voice growing stronger. You are right that we are evolutionary wildcards. You are right that our ancestors became the monsters in your legends. But those same ancestors also became allies to the oppressed, teachers to the weak, and friends to anyone who treated them fairly. That is also in our DNA. He looked directly at Counselor Thrace. Let humanity join the Council. Not as the young species we appear to be, but as what we actually are. We are the descendants of your war gods, choosing to stand with you instead of apart from you. Because when that fleet arrives, you are going to need every advantage you can get. Marcus paused, then delivered the final piece of information. And Uncle Bob has agreed to come out of retirement, along with 300 others like him. The last living humans who remember how to fight the way your legends describe. The chamber fell silent again, but this time the silence felt different. Thrace looked at Marcus with new understanding. Around the hall, species who had been calling for humanity's quarantine were now reconsidering. We will deliberate, Thrace announced. Ambassador Webb, you will remain on the council station. We may have more questions. As Marcus was escorted from the chamber, Professor Kelvon approached him. Ambassador, if I may ask, what did those 300 veterans do during your world's last conflicts? Marcus smiled, but there was no humor in it. They made sure we did not have any more conflicts, Professor. They are peacekeepers and teachers now. But before that, he met the alien's gaze. Let us just say there is a reason the Consolidation Accord happened when it did. Someone had to convince every human government that peace was the only option. And Uncle Bob's generation can be very convincing. The council station became a hive of frantic activity. Marcus was given quarters in the diplomatic section, a comfortable room with a window showing the stars beyond. He did not have long to rest. Within hours, Uncle Bob arrived on a transport from Earth. Along with 5 other elderly humans, Marcus met them in the station's arrival bay. Uncle Bob looked the same as always, wearing simple clothes and carrying a small bag. The others were similar, all elderly, all carrying themselves with quiet dignity that made even the station's security forces step aside. There was Aunt Kaisha, a woman in her 70s with dark skin and wise eyes. Thomas, a quiet man with white hair who moved like water. Maya, a doctor with strong hands and a gentle smile. Each one had their own story. Their own connection to the old days before the Consolidation Accord. They gathered in Marcus's quarters. And for the first time, Marcus heard the full truth behind the Accord. The portals were not random, Uncle Bob explained, sitting on the edge of a chair designed for aliens and looking somehow comfortable anyway. They followed patterns, rules we did not understand at first. Every time humans got too violent, too divided, too close to destroying ourselves, the portals would activate. Keisha continued the explanation. They would pull away our best warriors, our most violent populations, our most desperate refugees. They would scatter them across the galaxy. We thought it was a curse. We thought we were being punished for our violence. But after thousands of years, Thomas added in his quiet voice, some of us realized the truth. The portals were saving us from ourselves. They were a pressure release valve. Every time we got close to extinction, the galaxy would take away the pressure before we exploded. Maya nodded. My great-grandmother was one of the last to come through before the Accord. She was a soldier fighting in what would have been Earth's final world war. Millions dead. Nuclear weapons ready to launch. Then she and 3,000 others just vanished, pulled through portals that opened on the battlefield. They were scattered, Uncle Bob said. Different worlds. Different situations. Most died, but some survived. And when they finally made it home 30 years later, they brought a message. They had seen wonders. met species who had found peace, learned different ways of living. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. That is when we called the Great Meeting. Every nation, every tribe, every human group on Earth, it took 5 years, but we agreed. Seal the portals, destroy the records, start fresh, give ourselves time to grow up. But we kept the guardians, Kaisha said softly. A few from each generation who remember, who know the truth, who make sure that if the portals ever reactivate, we will know what to do. Marcus absorbed this information. You are not just veterans of Earth's conflicts. You are descendants of the ones who came back through the portals. You carry their memories, their skills. We carry the choice, Uncle Bob corrected. Every day we choose to be guardians of peace rather than weapons of war. That is what makes us different from the legends. Meanwhile, in the council chambers, a different conversation was happening. The 16 counselors met with the Whispers and Archivist Prime in a secure session. The approaching fleet was now their primary concern. The Whispers revealed what they knew. The fleet was from something called the Old Dark, species that had fled the galaxy millions of years ago. They were returning not as conquerors but as refugees, fleeing something worse in the void. They will have technology beyond anything we possess, Archivist Prime warned. If we refuse them, they will take what they need by force. If we accept them, we will have to displace existing populations. There's no good option. Thrace looked troubled. Unless we expand. The galaxy has thousands of uninhabitable systems. Worlds too hostile for most species but rich in resources. We have never bothered with them because adaptation would take too long. A whisper flickered with what might have been amusement. Now you understand why humanity's timing is so convenient. You think humans could adapt to those worlds? Another counselor asked. Even with their aggressive evolution, that would take decades. Look at their history, Archivist Prime said. Humans stranded on high-radiation worlds developed resistance within 3 generations. Humans on frozen planets showed enhanced thermal regulation. They do not just adapt. They thrive where others would die. Thrace understood. You want humans as colonizers. Send them to hostile worlds, let them adapt, prepare those systems for the refugees. We want to offer humans a choice, the Whisper corrected. They can remain on Earth, safe and isolated. Or they can join the galactic community as what their evolution prepared them for, pioneers. Back in the diplomatic quay, Bretar's alarm suddenly screamed through the station. The floor shook. Marcus and the Guardians rushed to the observation deck. Through the windows they saw something impossible. A portal had opened in space, massive and swirling with energy that should not exist anymore. Through it came dozens of figures in ancient pressure suits. Tumbling in the vacuum, Uncle Bob's face went pale. That is not possible. We sealed all the portals. But Kaisha was already checking the readings. Not all of them. Look at the energy signature. This is not one of the architect's portals. This is something older. Something that existed before them. The station's rescue teams retrieved the humans from space. 43 of them. Their suits were cobbled together from alien technology that looked ancient. When they were brought aboard, Marcus saw something that made his breath catch. These humans were different. Some had skin that reflected light like mirrors. Others had eyes that glowed faintly. They were adapted in ways Earth's humans were not. The first one to regain consciousness was a woman. She spoke in a language that Marcus's translator struggled with. Ancient words that had not been used for thousands of years. Uncle Bob stepped forward. His eyes widened. I understand her. She is speaking proto-human, a dialect from before written language. The woman grabbed his arm with surprising strength. Her mirror-like skin caught the light in strange patterns. The architects did not seal all the portals. They hid one, deep in the black hole at the galaxy's core. We have been there, trapped, generations of us. She gasped for breath, her glowing eyes wide with fear. And we bring a warning. They are not just refugees. They are running from something. something that is following them. And it knows about Earth. Marcus and Uncle Bob looked at each other. The approaching fleet was not the real threat. It was just the beginning. The woman's final words before she collapsed were barely audible. The harvesters are coming, and they want human DNA. The council station transformed into a crisis center overnight. The 43 humans from the hidden portal were placed in medical quarantine, but their leader, the woman with mirror-like skin, was allowed to brief the council under heavy guard. Her name was Helena. She stood in the judgment circle where Marcus had stood days before, but she looked nothing like him. Her skin reflected the chamber's lights in patterns that hurt to look at. Her eyes glowed with soft blue luminescence. When she moved, she seemed slightly out of sync with normal reality. As if she existed a fraction of a second ahead of everyone else, she told a story that made every species in the chamber fall silent with dread. 50,000 years ago, Helena began, her voice strange and echoing, an ancient species called the Harvesters ruled this galaxy. They did not conquer through military force. They conquered through genetic theft. She explained how the Harvesters would study promising species, extract their genetic material, use it to enhance themselves, and leave the original populations sterile and dying. They have perfected this technique over millions of years, collecting the best traits from thousands of species. The architects discovered this, Helena continued. They fled, taking with them genetic samples from hundreds of threatened species. They established a hidden civilization inside the accretion disk of the galaxy's central black hole. The extreme gravity and radiation acted as a shield. There, they worked to preserve what the harvesters had tried to destroy. She gestured to herself and her people. We are descendants of humans who were taken to that refuge 12,000 years ago. We have lived in conditions that would kill normal beings instantly, protected by architect technology and our own evolved resilience. The architects are all dead now, but their systems kept us safe and kept us preparing. Uncle Bob spoke up from where he stood beside Marcus. Preparing for what? Helena's glowing eyes fixed on him. For the day the harvesters returned. They were not destroyed. They were sleeping, waiting for the galaxy to repopulate with new genetic material. And now they are waking up. She pointed at the holographic display showing the approaching fleet. Those are not refugees. That is a harvester vanguard. They have been chasing the real refugees, studying them, learning from them. And they learned about a species that shows more evolutionary potential than anything they have encountered in their entire existence. Humans, Archivist Prime whispered. US, Helena confirmed. The harvesters want our DNA. They want to understand our aggressive evolution, our adaptability, our refusal to die. If they capture Earth, if they harvest humanity, they will become unstoppable. Every species in this galaxy will fall within a generation. The council erupted in chaos. Some species demanded immediate evacuation of Earth's population. Others suggested a preemptive strike against the approaching fleet. A few quietly advocated for surrender, hoping the harvesters might spare them if they did not resist. Councillor Thrace tried to call for order. But 700 species all had different ideas about how to respond. The noise was deafening. Marcus watched as the unity he had hoped to find dissolved into panic and division. Then Uncle Bob walked to the center of the judgment platform. He did not shout. He did not use any technology. He just stood there, an elderly man in a flannel shirt, and somehow the chamber gradually fell silent. Every eye turned to him. With respect, counselors, Uncle Bob said quietly, you are all thinking about this wrong. Thrace leaned forward. Explain. You are thinking about the harvesters as an external threat, something coming from outside that you need to defend against. But that is not how humans learn to fight. Uncle Bob looked around at the assembled species. When you are outnumbered, outgunned, and out of options, you do not meet the enemy head-on. You make yourself too costly to take. You make the prize not worth the price. Marcus understood first. You want to let them come. I want to let them try, Uncle Bob corrected. Helena and her people evolved in the most extreme conditions imaginable. The harvesters have technology that can destroy fleets. We have numbers and genetic diversity they cannot predict. More importantly, we have 40,000 years of humans scattered across this galaxy who learned to fight smart, not just hard. Kaisha stood as well, joining Uncle Bob in the circle. The legends Professor Kelvon found were not about human strength. They were about human stubbornness. Humans who would not quit. Humans who turned impossible situations into victories by refusing to play by the enemy's rules. Thomas added his quiet voice. My grandfather used to say, cannot stop what will not stay still. The harvesters want to harvest us? Make them chase us across every hostile world, every impossible environment, every place where normal species cannot survive but humans thrive. Maya stepped forward. And while they are chasing us, learning about us, adapting to us, we learn about them. We take their technology. We figure out their weaknesses. We do what humans have always done. We improvise. The council was listening now, really listening. Helena smiled, and it was a fierce expression. The architects preserved more than genetic samples in their refuge. They preserved knowledge, weapons, technologies designed specifically to fight the harvesters. Most species could not survive long enough in those conditions to learn them. But humans could, Archivist Prime said softly. We already have, Helena confirmed. My people are ready to teach anyone willing to learn. But it will not be easy. The training happens in environments most of you would consider lethal. High radiation, crushing gravity, toxic atmospheres. Uncle Bob looked directly at Counselor Thrace. So here is humanity's real offer. Accept us into the council as the vanguard you need us to be. We will take those hostile systems you mentioned. We will settle them, adapt to them, turn them into fortresses. We will train anyone who can survive the conditions. And when the harvesters come, they will not find 700 species hiding behind a defensive line. They will find a galaxy that learned to fight like humans. Dirty, Thomas said. Smart, Kaisha added. Together, Maya finished. Silence filled the chamber. Then a whisper spoke, its voice carrying something that might have been approval. The architects chose to save what could be saved and wait for someone strong enough to finish their war. It seems they were saving humanity for exactly this moment. Counselor Thrace stood, all four of his arms spread wide. The council will vote. But first, Ambassador Webb, one question. Your uncle speaks of training our people in human methods. Would humanity accept alien volunteers? Species willing to undergo genetic modification to adapt alongside your settlers? Marcus looked at Uncle Bob, who grinned. Counselor, humans have been adopting strays and making them family since before we had cities. You want to send us your veterans, your fighters, your people who do not quit? We will teach them everything we know. And 40 years from now, when those harvesters arrive, they will not be facing humans alone. They will be facing everyone who learned to think like humans, Maya said. Thrace nodded slowly. Then let us vote. All in favor of granting humanity full council membership and commencing the Pioneer Initiative. The vote was overwhelming. Species after species signaled approval. Even those who had argued for caution recognized that humanity offered something unprecedented. Not power, but persistence. Not superiority, but stubbornness. As the chamber erupted in cautious celebration, Professor Kelvon approached Uncle Bob. Gunnery Sergeant Williams, I must revise my research. My paper called humans mythical war gods. But that is not accurate, is it? Uncle Bob chuckled and patted the alien's shoulder gently. No, Professor. We are not gods. Gods do not get tired. Gods do not get scared. Gods do not have to make things up as they go. He smiled. We are just humans, and sometimes that is enough. The final transmission to Earth was brief. Marcus stood in the communications center, looking at the camera. They voted yes. The Pioneer Initiative begins immediately. Uncle Bob says to pack for extreme conditions and tell Mom he will be home for the holidays in about 50 years. Behind him, through the station windows, the galaxy spread out in all its beauty. Somewhere out there, the harvesters were coming. But now, instead of facing them alone, 700 species would stand together. led by the descendants of ancient nightmares who chose to become unlikely heroes, just Uncle Bob and people like him, doing what humans do best. Making the impossible merely difficult. And making friends along the way. The story was not over. It was just beginning. But for the first time in 50,000 years, the galaxy had hope. And that hope wore a flannel shirt and fixed porches in its spare time. Two halves retriclawed can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.